Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. 'Cause I don't want to run this race in vain.
Come on, Surreal.
Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Okay, I'll give you the starting line. Stand by me while I run this race. Now you come in. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Come, I don't want to run this race in vain. I'm your child while I run this race. Race. Come on. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I...
Last week I talked about our great cloud of witnesses. And this week I want to explore the real point that the author of Hebrews is trying to make in this passage. The passage in question that I'm referring to is Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 2a. It reads, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off every hindrance and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with endurance the race set out before us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith." So the author is essentially making a point that we need to finish the race set out before us. In fact, that's why he's talking about the great cloud of witnesses, because they can help us, assist us, and support us in running and completing the race set out before us. Now, you may be wondering, why are we running this race? What exactly is the race set out before us? Well, the author is talking about the long journey of faith. He's talking about a marathon, not a sprint. That's why he's emphasizing endurance. You need endurance for the long haul, for the long run. And I think comparing the life of faith to a marathon is actually a pretty good analogy. Then the author says, fix your eyes on Jesus. Stay focused on Jesus. He is the author and perfecter of our faith. When the author says Jesus is the founder or originator of our faith, what this means in this particular metaphor of our faith being a marathon is that Jesus created the course or carved out the path or paved the path for us to follow in order for us to finish our own marathon of faith. And when the author says that Jesus is the one who perfected our faith, that the root Greek word there is teleos, which means to consummate, to complete, to fulfill. And so what that means in this context is Jesus is the one who has finished or completed or fulfilled the race perfectly. So basically what the author is saying is, you're not going to beat Jesus' world record here. But if you want to learn how to complete your own marathon, then there's no one better to learn from and look to than Jesus. In a sense, what he's saying is, if you want to finish your marathon of faith, do what Jesus did. Now, you're probably thinking about the bracelets that some of us wore in the 90s and early 2000s. WWJD, what would Jesus do? Well, theologian Dallas Willard offers some good advice with regards to this cliche question, what would Jesus do? He says, don't ask, what would Jesus do? It's not helpful because you're not Jesus. You have very different gifts, very different abilities, very different personality, very different limitations, and a very different calling than Jesus had. You're not capable of doing what Jesus did, and that's not the point. So instead of asking, what would Jesus do? Ask, what would Jesus do if he were me? With my personality, with my gifts, with my abilities, with my limitations. Now, this distinction, it might sound subtle, but it really makes a huge difference. So when the author is saying, do what Jesus did, here is what I understand the author to be saying. So Jesus fully and perfectly fulfilled the divine calling, the divine expectation, the divine purpose that God gave to him. And we are called to do the same. That is your marathon. That is the race set out before you, specifically to fulfill your unique calling, your divine purpose, just as Jesus did. So the finish line of this race is our own teleos, our own completeness, our own wholeness. It's a marathon of moving towards maturity, becoming the mature version of the person that you were created to be. So my marathon of faith is becoming the ideal Troy, the best version possible of this unique guy named Troy that God created and intended me to be. So the long journey of faith is about perpetually becoming a truer version of yourself. And what I mean by that is decreasing the degree of false self that we've talked about many times, decreasing the degree of false self that is dominating your conscious life, and increasing the degree of true self that is being made manifest in your conscious life. Another way of saying this is you mature as you more fully reflect the image of God, the light of Christ, through the unique prism of your life. So the marathon of faith is about growth, growing towards maturity. So like running a marathon, growth requires movement. You can't finish the marathon of life. You can't complete the marathon of faith set before you by staying where you are. You can't grow by staying where you are. Growth requires movement, just as running a marathon does. Now, the author also mentions we need endurance. Without endurance, building endurance, training to develop endurance, we won't be able to continue running the marathon we are on. We won't be able to finish the race set before us. Now, you also can't finish the marathon of faith unless you learn to pace yourself. If you take off and run too fast in the beginning, you're going to gas yourself. You won't make it. The life of faith, it isn't a sprint. You need to slow down. You need to get a system, get a plan, and follow the plan. Even if you feel like you could be going harder, you need to save some energy in the tank for later. This is a really, really long race you're in. In fact, it's your entire lifetime. So pace yourself for the long run. That's what the author is telling us. Now, some of you may be thinking, ugh, the last thing I feel like doing right now is running a marathon. I get it. So what do you do if you feel stuck? You're tired, you're exhausted, like you just can't run anymore. Well, the first thing you need to do is accept where you're at. Accept, I'm stuck. I'm worn out. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I can't move. The second thing you need to do is figure out why you're stuck. Why are you worn out? If you identify the problem, then you can start figuring out a solution, a way to move forward. But you've got to be able to understand what is the real problem I'm dealing with here. It's often more subtle and nuanced than what immediately meets the eye. Sometimes the only solution is rest. You need to take some rest, find some rest. Sometimes the solution is training. You need someone to teach you how to run more efficiently. Sometimes you need a good coach. There are many possible solutions, but the key is to understand what is the real problem holding me back, hindering me. Why am I stuck? Why do I feel like I can't move anymore? Identify the problem, then find a solution. A British-Austrian philosopher named Karl Popper says, all life is problem solving. Shantideva, an Indian philosopher and Buddhist monk from the 8th century, says, if you can solve your problem, then what is the need of worrying about it? And if you can't solve your problem, if there is no solution to it, then what is the use of worrying about it? Understanding our real problem and then being able to understand whether there's a solution to it or not really helps us understand how we can move forward. Another way of saying this is identifying the real problem that we need to be solving is often the biggest problem to solve. It was me who said that. So sometimes we get stuck because we don't know where to go. Growth is a race. And in order to grow, you need to know where to run. You need to know which direction you need to move. And sometimes in life, we don't know which way to move. And that's okay. In fact, one of the simplest models for spiritual growth has 2 stages: disorientation and reorientation. It's okay to be disoriented. In fact, it's essential for your spiritual growth. It's an important part of the cycle of this 2-stage spiritual growth model: disorientation and reorientation. But here's the thing, you can't grow if you stay disoriented. Growth is a process of constantly shifting from disorientation to reorientation. So if you don't know which way to move, you don't know which way to go, it's possible you're in the phase of disorientation in your spiritual growth cycle. Now, the point of disorientation isn't to stay disoriented. The point of disorientation is so you can find your way again, so you can find your true north. And once you do, once you figure out, okay, this is where I need to move, or this is what I need to work on, well, now you're in the reorientation phase. But that doesn't usually last that long either. What happens after we reorient is we inevitably get into autopilot mode. We take our eye off the finish line, we stop paying attention to the path that we need to be following, and soon enough we're off course again. One day we wake up or we look around and we're like, wait, where am I? What am I doing? How did I get here? Where is that large automobile? This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. We feel disoriented. And here's the thing, like I said, disorientation is good. It's not a bad thing, because disorientation makes us aware that we are off course. It helps us see that we need to reorient ourselves back to the path, to get back on track towards moving towards the target of maturity. Now, what exactly is the finish line that we are racing towards? Well, remember, it's doing the same thing Jesus did. It is fulfilling our divine potential, our divine calling, our divine purpose in life. Now, how do you know what your divine purpose is? Well, that could be a message series, let alone an entire message. But here is a very oversimplified, but I think still helpful illustration of how we can discern what our divine calling, our divine purpose is in life. Here's a Venn diagram. And there are 2 circles. In one circle, you list the things that you want. What do you really want in life? We often don't know the answer to that question. It's worth taking some time to respond to. What do you really want? And then in the other side, in the other circle, what does God want from your life? What does God expect of your life? What does God demand of your life? And where those two circles intersect, where they overlap, in the middle, that is the sweet spot, the bullseye of your target. Now, the first step to running the marathon of faith is to know where to go, to know what path will take you to the finish line. That's the first essential ingredient. The second step is to get rid of everything that hinders you from moving towards the finish line. Get rid of anything that is hindering you from fulfilling your calling, your divine purpose. And the author talks about sin here. He uses the S word. Now, sin simply means missing the mark. Sin is whatever makes you veer off course. Sin is deviation from the path that is taking you towards your target, towards the finish line. So to get rid of sin is to get rid of anything that is causing you to deviate from fulfilling your divine calling, your divine purpose. And this is really what it means to stay true to yourself. Stay true like an arrow that is flying straight and true toward its target. Well, the third step is to endure with joy. Endurance is really important, but it's not enough. You also need the motivating, inspiring influence of joy in your life if you are to be able to finish the race set out before you. Let me read the passage from Hebrews again, the rest of verse 2, to help you understand what I'm talking about. The author of Hebrews says, "Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set out before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and then sat down at the right hand of the throne of God." Joy comes from being able to look past the pain and discomfort that we are either presently in or that is immediately before us, and to see what lies on the other side. We need both endurance and this perspective of joy in order to stay motivated and get through the difficult, hard, painful times. This divine joy is what empowers and enables us to accept that it's going to hurt for a bit. Things are going to get hard. Things we're going to suffer. But the reward on the other side of the struggle and pain is worth it. Well, there you have it. Those are some thoughts on how to keep moving forward in this marathon of life, this long, long journey of faith, of moving towards maturity.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Stand by me, stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. I'm your child. I'm your child while I run this race. I'm your child while I run this race. I'm your child while I run this race. For I feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Now jam up! Michael, so good to have you here this morning.